Iraq. You were one of 4 senators in this race who voted for the authorization for President Bush in 2002. You have said it was a mistake. That vote was a mistake. Senator Clinton has not. Why do you believe it was a mistake, and what do you think of Senator Clinton's current legislation, which would cap the number of troops at about 130,000, where they were on January 1st, 2007, and begin redeployment out of Iraq in 90 days?
Well, first of all, and my good friend and colleague, Senator Clinton, will speak for herself, and I'll let her tell you why she takes the position she does. There are 2 things that people in public life, 2 responses 2 people in public life never like to give, and I don't understand why. I made a mistake, and I don't know. There are 2 very reasonable answers to questions. When you make a mistake, there's nothing wrong with admitting that, in my view. I've made them in the past. I'll make them in the future. It was a mistake, in my view, to vote the way we did 5 years ago on that resolution. And we need, and that's an important question, and certainly the information we had about imminent use of weapons of mass destruction was a major factor, I think, that people made the decision they did. It's a legitimate question to talk about. But we don't need to compound that mistake by continuing to make ones in the future. And we need to talk about where we go from here in Iraq. So that's a legitimate issue, but I think the more important question, respectfully I say to you, is where do we go from here? I'm of a view that we ought to begin redeploying forces immediately out of those highly densely populated areas in Baghdad. We could be doing things like border security, training Iraqi soldiers and policemen to do the job for themselves, providing some effort in counterterrorism, I think would be a legitimate use of those people. But don't put our men and women in uniform into these highly, densely populated urban areas where they're nothing more than referees in a civil war. We need to get them out of there as soon as possible, in my view. Let me also just say to you, George, one of the difficulties I have with this, again, can't say how accurate this polling data is, and I'm not suggesting our foreign policy ought to be conducted by polling. But if it's true that 80% of the people of Iraq think that we're the cause of the chaos in their country, and over 60% of the Iraqi people believe it's appropriate to try and take shots at American servicemen and women, then it's awfully difficult to explain to people in this country why we're spending $2 billion a week, $8 billion a month at the cost of human life to be in a country that apparently doesn't think we're helping them at all. So my view is we're going to be pulling back, and I would say we ought to start doing that recently. You can't be conducting a foreign policy in Iraq by having a poll-driven, sticking your finger in the wind kind of policy. I want to see the Congress have real debates with real resolutions, with real accountability. With all due respect, we've spent the last several weeks debating. Young men and women are losing their lives in Iraq. They deserve better than we're giving them.
But Senator, you say you want to begin redeploying, particularly out of Baghdad, immediately. How do you respond to the view of the National Intelligence Estimate, the consensus view of our intelligence community, that that kind of redeployment, particularly if it's quick, is going to create more chaos in Baghdad?
How much more chaos could we be creating in Baghdad than exists today? This is literally, there are 23 militias operating in Baghdad, not including insurgents and Baathists, possibly al-Qaeda elements. The idea that 17,000 people in a city of 6 million people are going to sort out that kind of conflict, I think, is what everyone has said can't be done, including General Petraeus, before he received the job he did, said more troops do not get you more security. General Casey, General Dempsey. I was there about 4 or 5 weeks ago with Senator Kerry. We went over. Every officer we talked to, when the surge was being discussed, said, this is a mistake. The Baker-Hamilton Commission said, you cannot solve this problem through military force. We need a surge in diplomacy, a surge in politics, begin negotiations, even with people we don't particularly like, in Iran, in Syria, to try and build some possibility there. That's, I think, how you can create the stability in Iraq and a real opportunity for some hope for the future.
Okay, now it's time for your closing statements.
Is that the 3?
That's it. That's it.
Those are my 3 questions. 1 minute here. I'm a first-time father. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'm probably the only candidate here who gets mail from AARP and diaper services. You know, I want you to know. And I mention that to you because I've been asked a lot of times, why are you doing this, in a sense? Why are you running? And I don't know all of you here, but I suspect many of you are parents or grandparents. I'm a first-time parent. My daughter Grace was born 2 days after 9/11. and I look at my children, and I want my children to grow up in a country and a world that's a lot more secure and a lot safer than the one I think they're going to encounter if we don't create change in this country, if we don't get new leadership in this nation. I feel it very, very strongly. Someday, my daughters and your children and others are going to ask you and I both, what did you do at the outset of the 21st century to get this right? This is now our watch. It's our responsibility to make sure we leave them a country at least as good and as prosperous and as hopeful as the ones that you and I received from the generations who come before us. That's our job now as Democrats, as Americans, to try and come together with real solutions for these real problems we face, to get back on track again, to reestablish those connections around the world, to invest in our people at home so that we get decent health care, a good education system. We have a good economy in our country that takes care of working people. I'm proud to have authored the Family and Medical Leave Act, where 50 million people today can be with their children at a time of crisis, or a parent or a spouse. That's the kind of leadership we need, bringing people together. I would just ask you that over these next 11 months, I'm going to be coming to Nevada, we'll be in Iowa and South Carolina and New Hampshire and these other states to make our case. We're going to do it, I hope, in a spirit of cooperation. These other candidates you're going to meet are very good people. I admire them immensely. They bring a lot of strengths to these candidacies. Let's stick together as Democrats. Let's talk positively and constructively about our country, and let's have a great win. And on January 20th, 2009, you're all invited to come to my inauguration as the next President of the United States.
Good to see you.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much. Thanks.